Hi everyone, please support our videos on Patreon. The link's at the end of the video and in the down there part. Thank you, you're lovely. Okay, this was originally going to be a first impressions, but then the series ended and I found I only really wanted to talk about one thing because there's already a dozen YouTubers talking about the other thing. Now just fucking listen, you were going to do it anyway. Okay, so I've had a bad experience with Disney Star Wars. Since they bought the franchise, I've been pushed further and further into the Old Republic and saying wake me when they do something interesting. Most of Disney Star Wars has been pandering fan service, digging up stuff from Legends, usually surrounding the original trilogy and saying, hey, remember this? They had 2 live action shows that were just that for their entire runtime. As the sequel trilogy started to disappoint, a shift in how people perceive the prequels alerted Disney to the idea that making prequel nostalgia was something that was reliably bankable. And that shouldn't be a surprise. Next to The Force Awakens, The Phantom Menace is one of the highest grossing Star Wars films. There's always been a much larger fan base for the prequels than there has been people who vehemently hate them. So plans were underway for a film about Obi-Wan Kenobi, at least until Solo bombed at the box office. And honestly, I feel that was premature because I think Obi-Wan was always going to be a more reliably bankable character for a film than Han Solo. Anyway, it got pivoted to being a 6-episode miniseries, and even the promise of more Ewan McGregor and more Hayden Christensen still gave me pause. See, I can tell when I'm being pandered to, and I don't like it. If I'm gonna watch this, it has to be more than just a guided tour of prequel nostalgia. I want something new in Star Wars, and I'm not gonna change my tune on that just because the pandering fan service is now fan service specifically geared toward me. Admittedly, in hindsight, I should have known better. Prequel fan service is a different beast to original trilogy and Clone Wars fan service. It's not really about references and callbacks and remember this. Obi-Wan just saying hello there was never really gonna get people right in the stomach. For all the fan service Star Wars fans beg for, I'm pretty sure they would sour at a show just being a highlight reel of r/prequel memes. But even ignoring that, just having Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen in a show was already going to blow the fan service early because those two are the Star Wars equivalent of people like the prequels because they're very heartfelt, emotional, and politically charged stories. You can't just General Kenobi your way through that, and I think that's probably why Obi-Wan Kenobi is so good, because it understands that the real prequel nostalgia is just a good story about good characters. It's not about mining nostalgia, it's about making it. So with that in mind, let's talk about Reva, which means we first need to talk about the Inquisitors. The Inquisitors were established in Rebels, you know, that Clone Wars replacement series that people only liked when it was mining Clone Wars nostalgia. They were a sort of Force-sensitive Jedi hunting group tasked with finishing Order 66. And let's be brutally honest, they're not very good as characters or villains. In fact, they were emblematic of Disney's nasty habit of just taking ideas from Legends and doing them worse. See, Legends had a version of the Inquisitors, but there it was just one guy, a Force-sensitive young man that Vader took in as a child and trained as his secret apprentice. What made it work was that the way Starkiller was trained always carried the implication that Anakin was missing his old apprentice, given that Starkiller and Ahsoka both used their lightsabers in the same way and were created in the same year. It was a neat little bit of characterization for Anakin, but also just by virtue of being one character, that one character could be given some half-decent writing. I mean, granted, Starkiller wasn't a great character. He had the same problem Cal Kestis had of just being the single most generic looking white guy in the room for whom screaming was emotion. I'm not even exaggerating for a joke, he's literally the default template for video game protagonists. But he was a stronger character overall than the Inquisitors just by virtue of being able to be developed to any extent. The problem with the Inquisitors is that there's just too many to characterize. It's the same problem they had with the Knights of Ren, and other shows have with these rogue galleries of villains. There isn't enough time, and so all of the focus usually ends up on 1 or 2 characters, and the rest are just kind of cannon fodder. I can't believe I have to say this, but Disney, stop trying to make Organization 13 happen. It's not going to happen. Actually, just stop trying to be Kingdom Hearts, okay?
When you were little, you formed a special bond. We are brothers who together make a greater whole.
The Inquisitors never really had the chance to shine because there's just too many of them, and all they really had to make up for that was helicopter lightsabers, which is just piss. The Inquisitors really only ended up being any good when they went back to the thing that they were poorly copying. So in Jedi Falcon Onderon, you only really interact with one, Trilla Siduri, also known as should have been the one we actually played as, because the Inquisitors were just a set dressing for a character that could have just as easily been any old Dark Jedi, and the Inquisitors were just an excuse to have her in the story. A story about masters disappointing you and failing you. It seemed people at Lucasfilm were listening to how positively Trilla was received and how disappointed the ending of her story was.
Avenge us!
Because they decided to do it again, but properly this time. The deuteragonist of the Kenobi series is Reva Savander, the third sister of the Inquisitors.
That way, when you reach for anything, you think of us. You protect your family. I like that, Anna. You think you could protect them from me?
Oh my god, she's so cool. Reva is one of the coolest characters Disney has introduced. She single-handedly makes the Inquisitors interesting by virtue of being really emotionally invested in the plot. She really wants to hunt down Obi-Wan, and it's revealed that she knows that Darth Vader is Anakin Skywalker, which means she's unusually close to Vader, so things are personal for him, and that means they're personal for her, and oh, I knew this was gonna be fun. My expectations for this character after the first 2 episodes were incredibly high, and I spent most of the series just praying she'd make it out alive, let alone get a satisfying ending, because she was the cool new character with the story arc that wasn't a foregone conclusion. Like, nobody has to be convinced to watch Ewan McGregor reprise his role as the single hottest space dilf who ever lived, and nobody had to be convinced to watch Hayden Christensen remind everyone why he's the best actor for Anakin Skywalker ever. But Reva is the character with the new story whose conclusion we aren't certain of yet. We already know by virtue of A New Hope existing that Obi-Wan will get out of this just fine, Leia will be fine, yada yada, and that doesn't make their story any less fun. It is in fact very fun, but Reva's story is the unknown element, and it's the one I'm interested in. I've been a big proponent for Star Wars to do new things, and while watching Ewan and Hayden get back together just in time to be truly appreciated by an audience that still isn't quite ready to accept that the prequels were overhated and are actually very good films is nice, and I did shed my share of tears over that fateful confrontation, that flashback scene, and Qui-Gon's appearance, I shed way more tears over something else that we're about to get to. Because from episode 5 onward, we learn the truth that anyone with eyes had known since the prologue. Reva isn't just another Inquisitor, she's a youngling. She's a survivor of Order 66 who saw Anakin cut down her best friends. We actually see her at the very start of the series with a group of other younglings and later learn that she was the only one to survive. All of them were killed by Anakin right in front of her when she thought he was there to help them. This has actually deeply traumatized her, and she has spent her life working her way up the ranks of the Inquisitors in order to get close to Darth Vader to kill him as revenge for what he did to her and her family. And she's been extremely ruthless and ambitious in achieving that goal, or rather, she says she is. The Inquisitors are quick to claim Reva as the least of them, one whose rage is impotent and only momentarily useful, and it later turns out that both the Grand Inquisitor and Vader were completely aware of what she was doing. And part of the reason for this, I suspect, is because Reva is actually very bad at being evil. Out of all the Darksiders in live-action Star Wars, Reva has the lowest body count of like 1 person. Even Kylo Ren has a higher body count than she does, and he's the wussiest man in the galaxy. Reva talks a big game, threatens people, and bluffs a lot, but when push comes to shove, she tends to let people live, let them escape, or take the first opportunity to not have to follow through when someone calls her bluff. She chokes every single time she has to do something unequivocally evil because she just doesn't have it in her, and she keeps pushing herself to further and further extremes only to choke again and again and again. She's drawing on the dark side to get her revenge, but her heart just isn't in it because this just isn't who she is. Toward the very end of her story, she discovers that Luke is Vader's son and resolves to kill him to make Vader suffer, but once again, she just can't do it. And it tears her up inside because she thinks this is what she needs to do to avenge her family.
I couldn't do it. I failed him. He killed all small and I couldn't do it.
This is a story we hadn't really seen until now. Jedi who escaped Order 66 was common story fodder, but we've never seen it explore just how traumatizing it would be to actually survive that. There's a scene in Revenge of the Sith where Anakin comes into the council chambers to see the younglings cowering there, and when he walks in, they rush out of their hiding places and one of them asks what they're going to do. They think Anakin is there to help them, and they flinch when they realize the truth. It's often underplayed just what that does to a person, and indeed the fact that the majority of the younglings died in the temple is used by the franchise to avoid having to deal with that. Order 66 was horrific, one of the most truly macabre moments in the entire franchise that the series has neither been able to nor tried to top. It's a gruesome, senseless slaughter, almost like a pogrom, sparked by a man who wanted nothing more than to eliminate anyone who could have stopped him from ruling the galaxy. It's the single most supreme act of unmitigated evil in the entire franchise, and every depiction of it has been equally horrific. It almost makes you sick just to think about, and even for the film, some parts of it are too gruesome for even Lucas to show. But they've never really unpacked the sheer trauma of having to be a survivor of that kind of massacre. What it does to a child to see your friends die, to survive only by hiding under their bodies, and to lose them to someone you thought would protect you and ultimately betrayed you. The hatred Reva carries for Vader is one she also carries for Obi-Wan, indeed for most of the Jedi Masters, who didn't stop it. It's as I said, Anakin wasn't a good person, but he didn't have as much of a say in what kind of person he ended up becoming as he would have liked. A lot of people are responsible for this, and she knows this. I don't really think trauma has been a focal point of Star Wars this deeply before, as both Reva and Obi-Wan have character arcs of needing to be free of the pain that Anakin has inflicted on them. We often talk about Anakin as this pitiful character who destroyed his own life, but we often forget that he made victims of so many people and ruined so many lives. And I don't think Star Wars has ever really addressed that either. Characters cry in Star Wars, particularly Rey does it a lot, but it's never the kind of just pitiful weeping that you see from Reva after letting Luke go, as she lets out the very kind of pain she's been holding back for a very long time. This is the moment that really just sucker punched me in the stomach. And in fact, Qui-Gon's appearance shortly afterward didn't even make me cry. I was just still crying over Reva, because Reva is someone who wanted vengeance. She was owed vengeance, and was just simply unable to take it. She wasn't able to actually kill Vader. I said before that there's no meaning to suffering. Trauma doesn't make you a better person, it doesn't make you stronger, it just hurts you. It has no deeper meaning, there's no will of the Force to make your suffering matter. But there is a meaning in surviving despite it, and learning to live and heal and find a purpose beyond it, and that's what Reva does get to do. She gets to be free, in a sense, and control her own destiny from this point onward. And we know that she will eventually get her justice. Vader will fall, the Emperor will fall, largely because she just couldn't bring herself to harm a child because she's just too much of a damn Jedi. It does brush up against the idea that wanting vengeance itself is wrong and will turn you into your abuser, which is a horrific attitude a lot of similar stories have gleefully indulged in with similar characters. Ahem. But it's insulated by the fact that not only does the story not actually go there, and in fact reinforces that no, Reva is not like Vader, but not once does anyone ever suggest forgiving Vader for his crimes. In fact, Vader is left alone on a barren, rocky planet, pitifully screaming about how Anakin is dead and he killed him, which in Star Wars has always been an unhealthy coping mechanism for other characters to avoid having to accept the horrible things he's done. Both Reva and Obi-Wan achieve their own sense of peace by leaving him behind and freeing themselves of the shackles he's placed on them. In truth, I'm really touched that this story about sadness and tragedy and decline ends with a victim of trauma achieving some sense of closure, or even a happy ending, and potentially getting to put aside her sadness and depression and self-loathing and escape into the possibilities of the future. It's a story that resonated with me in a way that stories don't usually unless I write them myself. I think there are many ways it could have been done a lot better, but I really, really like what it did. The decision to explore the trauma of not just Anakin's friend and teacher, but one of his victims, give them both equal billing and a satisfying ending without vilifying or demonizing said victim, and actually letting Star Wars do something not just new, but very emotionally moving and sincere in a time where Star Wars has been at its least sincere and its most cynical for almost a decade, is truly beautiful. It feels really good to like Star Wars again, you know? I hear rumors that they're going to give Reva her own show, and I really hope they do. I loved her arc here, and I really want to see her move forward into a more hopeful future. Moses Ingram, please come back and do more Star Wars. You're one of the best things to happen to the series since Disney bought it. Just... It's so good, you guys. It's so good!